My name is Dave Stricklan. I am a retired range science professor and wildlife. Yeah, those kids, those BLM kids, they're my students. And I told them, no, you listen to me now here. I told them, do not piss off the garden club or the horse ladies, because they have more energy than you ever do. And those little old ladies in tennis shoes will tear you apart. So anyway, and it's done some good, but you know, it's really interesting, the agency atmosphere and bureaucracy. And I now work with both the Forest Service and the BLM, and I run into students all the time. And it's really interesting. I worked, before I went to the university, for 12 years for the Forest Service and wrote a lot of permits. And it's a difficult environment to negotiate as a person. And it's interesting for me to be on the other side. So, and I've sued some of them, which is kind of fun. So there you go. So I work now for the Sagebrush Habitat Conservation Fund, and I consult with Western Watersheds, and I'm also working with a horse group, Amanda Kalimian, who many of you know, and yeah, and so that's kind of my background. I grew up really in a way that I suspect most of you wouldn't know. I grew up in the mountains, way back on a ranch, and going to town was a big deal, which we got to do once a month, and the town had 1,200 people. Okay, so I was 12 before I went to a town, Idaho Falls. Okay, so it's a different kind of growing up, and it's affected my perspective a lot. Okay, all right. Well, what I want to do today is talk to you about a rewilding project that we have, and it's with Rewilding America now, and Amanda and her group. And I want to differentiate this from what you've heard today. It doesn't have anything to do with HMAs or herd areas or any sanctuaries. This is not that, because those things, as has been mentioned today several times, the domestic livestock grazing permits trump them, even though they shouldn't. You have a law, okay, but we all know the reality on the ground, right? What I have done, because of my background and a little with the agencies and a little different thinking, we're not trying to work through the system and work through the laws. We just skipped the system and are using the system, and we're now the grazing permittee. Oh, so this will be really interesting. And as it turns out, we are using both bison and wild horses on BLM and Forest Service allotments. Okay, and this is a landscape size project. Okay, all right. So what I want to do is talk about scale and landscape, who we are, what our goals are, the definitions and some ecological principles, the details of it, and talk about biodiversity and questions, and we'll see what kind of time we have with that. You said that would advance for me. There we go. Okay, the Birch Creek Valley is on the Continental Divide. This is the Continental Divide here. This little notch will help kind of orient yourself on other maps here. I-15 goes right up through here. This is Yellowstone National Park. These are the central Idaho wilderness areas, and this is a little light. I wish it was a little darker in here. Perhaps you can see there's a little shading here. It's all shaded. There's a little bit of white there, but all of the shading means that it's some sort of public land. BLM, Forest Service, Park Service, something. So this corridor that goes from Yellowstone along the Centennials in through this forest and into the central Idaho wilderness areas, it's 97% public land. That's where we are. And this is the valley that I chose to work on, and I'll talk about the other valleys and why I didn't choose them. It's, you can see, about 400,000 acres, about a quarter of the size of Yellowstone National Park, and it controls the wildlife corridor from these two core areas. And as you recognize, rewilding is about the 3 C's: cores, corridors, and carnivores. And here are your 2 cores. And again, this doesn't show very good. Can we get those lights a little bit, maybe? If that's possible. This is the corridor, and we'll talk about the carnivores in it in a minute. Okay? So, the valley is 55 miles long, north to south. Cores. Carnivores. Carnivores. A little more. Actually, it's these front ones, if we could get them. Yeah. All right. So the valley is 55 miles north to south. It's 12 to 18 miles east to west. It is fenced by the Lemhi Mountain. Thank you. It didn't show very well anyway, but that's good. Leave it at that. The valley is fenced by 2 mountain ranges. On the west, it's the Lemhi Mountains, which are about 12,000 feet tall. And on the east, it's the Bitterroots, which are about 11,000 feet, and Beaverheads at the bottom. It also has a north-south corridor, wildlife corridor. This is the Idaho National Laboratory. There are reactors out there, and the engineers have no idea what's outside their building, which is really cool because that makes it an accidental preserve. That's sagebrush out there, and they don't know it's there. And then this is the Craters of the Moon National Monument. So it reaches almost to the Snake River. Okay, so when you teach wildlife management and you teach corridors, that's it. That is the largest and most important wildlife corridor in the lower 48. These are the 2 largest federally protected. Now there are some other wild areas in the Yukon and that kind of thing, but with federal law protection, Yellowstone and the Central Idaho units are the 2 largest federally protected units in between the Yukon and the Brazilian rainforest. That's it. This is it. Okay? All right. There is a pass through here. The animals go through that pass. The genes go in the phenotype of the grizzly bear, who packs the genes when he walks through that pass, and that's where he goes. Okay? It's called Uncle Ike Pass. We have purchased, and when I say we, I mean Manda and I. Well, Manda has purchased 1,383 acres of base property, which, as most of you know, the allotments are tied to. Okay? And then 4 large allotments, and the public land allotments are about 70,000 acres. Okay? Okay, let's go to the next one. Here we go. Just so that you can, sorry, I'll get in your way. Again, see this little notch? This is the Continental Divide. This is Birch Creek. These are called sink systems. In the Ice Age, these streams flowed all the way to the Snake River, but they go now and they sink in the Snake River plain. And each one of these valleys have potential from, right here is Yellowstone, so this is the Lamar Valley, this is Camas Creek, Beaver Creek, Medicine Lodge, that's Birch Creek, Little Lost, Big Lost, and Copper Basin. Those are in that corridor. If you stay in the corridor, that's almost all public land. And it's controlled by domestic livestock. Domestic livestock. So that's what we're doing, is we're purchasing those allotments. Now, each one of those valleys have some value and could have worked, but I chose Birch Creek. And the reason that I chose Birch Creek is because it has the elevational gradient. It goes from about 4,800 feet to about 12,000. And so people love the Lamar Valley. They call it in Yellowstone. That's where the wolves are. They call it the Serengeti of North America. It's not. It's too high. It's seasonal. Any of these valleys would be great, but I picked Birch Creek for some reasons. And ecologically, it's, well, maybe Copper Basin, but it is the most advantageous for rewilding. I wanted to show you then, this is the core for the Yellowstone Wildlife Gene Pool, and this is the Central Idaho core. This is the corridor along the Centennials. The red is Birch Creek, which controls the corridor, and we're controlling Birch Creek with our allotments. Some of you have started to hear about this. I've actually been kind of flying under the radar till I get this done. Okay. What else did I? Oh, so that Centennial corridor, in the late 1990s, I worked for the Forest Service as a wildlife biologist on the Island Park District of the Targhee National Forest, which borders Yellowstone National Park. And in fact, we were close enough that for lunch, we just hopped on our snowmobiles and ran over to West Yellowstone for a sandwich. Okay, it took about 14 minutes. And I worked there, and there were no grizzly bears. Bill Ingot lived there, and he had a sheep ranch. And dead grizzly bears are notoriously bad at reproducing. And we put into the forest plan a provision where you could buy out those sheep allotments, and those sheep allotments are gone, most of them. And the grizzly bears are to here, okay? They've moved all by themselves, and those live grizzly bears are much better breeders. She gets it. You're as good as the freshmen. They get that too, yeah. I'll show you a picture of a big male that a former student of mine took on a wildlife cam. He's about 15 miles from Birch Creek. They're moving west. Okay, so that's why we picked it. All right, I think that's about enough of that. Oh, why did I pick? Oh, there's a whole bunch of other reasons. It's landscape size. It's in the connective corridor. It's mostly public land. There aren't very many land. Some of those valleys have people who are not favorable to rewilding or wild horses. And the folks that are in Birch Creek are a little more thoughtful, and you can deal with them a little better. There's an elevational gradient. There are spirituality sites for the Shoshone Bannock folks and everyone. I'm not showing those, but there are a number of them there, and we. Pardon me? Okay. And then the mountains fence it, so the migration corridor is north to south seasonally. So those animals will move north to south. And it's politically feasible, and it is not, people don't live there. In some of those other valleys, it's not true. There are 8 people that live there year-round. One old gentleman died, but there was a baby born to one of the ranch families. So That's 8 people per 78 square miles. So in a lot of places, they do it the other way around by number of people per square mile. But in Birch Creek, we do it square miles per person. All right. So that's why we chose it. I do want to recognize that Birch Creek right there is in the Shoshone and Bannock peoples' traditional homelands. And in fact, the United States government negotiated this treaty with them. This treaty was signed, the Virginia City Treaty, and the show bands thought it was for real, but Congress never, Congress never went ahead and made it official. And this was shortly after the Bear River Massacre of Shoshone folks, and about 500 of them, including men, women, and children, and babes in arms, were shot at Bear Valley by the cavalry. And so after that happens to your society, how much leverage do you have? Anyway, this was their traditional homelands. Also, the Bannock people had, at Agency Creek, had a reservation as well, and they did a Trail of Tears kind of thing and marched them down. They took away the reservation and made them go to Fort Hall. Yeah.
My Mormon ancestors lived right there in Preston, settled that whole area, and were actually complicit in the Bear River Massacre. And what I find so appalling is that all the signage still call it the Battle of Bear River, and call little babies and their mothers enemy combatants. That's still how our government presents this in all the signage.
Yeah.
The Bear River Massacre happened during the Civil War, I think 1864.
Yeah.
And very few people know about it, but it was I worked on the Park Service. We did a new area study for it. And our chief historian said Park Service would consider it only if it was called a massacre instead of a battle. We have specific.
And my ancestors were in Logan Valley, were in Cache Valley too, and lived there.
We're probably second cousins, you and I.
Part of the 8.
Everybody is. So I taught at Brigham Young University, and
I'm so sorry.
And
did you eventually go to a real school?
I made it a real. My class was real. But the students would come up and say, "My mother knew you." He said, "What was her maiden name?" All right. All right, now I want to talk about this for a minute. And many of you have seen this. This is from Bob and Boone's paper. There's a citation. This is what we're talking about. So this is in eastern Oregon in the sagebrush, but it's about the same everywhere you go. In Birch Creek, there's a little more elk and less mule deer. But essentially, the forage that is appropriated to grazing animals is appropriated to domestic livestock. Sure. What we have done is we got grazing permits. And under the rules, so I worked for the agencies, I understood the rules, went into the agency people who I knew and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take wild horses and put them on there and bison. And they got the church giggles. It's like, you are using our own rules. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. And this will be filled by horses and bison. And we're going to reduce the grazing pressure some as well. Also, they will stay on the landscape all year long. Okay? Well, yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to feral. I know the group I'm with. So this is real. We took a filmmaker up there. He said, and he was from LA. He said, "Can you show me some wildlife?" I said, "I can show you some wildlife. Can you get it on film?" He says, "I can get it on." Here you go. I like this. It's fun. That's what it looks like. That's not photo.
That's not the Stanley Basin, is it?
Nope. Nope. We're higher. And Stanley Basin is that Copper Basin Valley I'm talking about. It's 2 valleys over. That's what this is. That's not photoshopped. It's short. I like it. Oh, I was going to do it again. Okay. So I've been working on this for a number of years and have had a number of cooperators that yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you about, I thought I'd always heard that the BLM would not sell or lease allotments to wild horses, period.
Oh.
That's what we've been told. What did you do?
Uh-huh. Okay, so. Oh, no. No. There are some blocks, and you have to know what you're doing, and I'll talk to you afterwards if you want to visit. It's doable, but you have to do, in order to put bison, native wildlife, on the public range in place of domestic cattle, which are invasive species from another continent, you have to go to the public and do NEPA in order to get. So when I say, well, we're replacing them with natural, and but one of the problems that you have is, and I suspect this is what your problem was, is they say, well, we have to do NEPA on that, and we put it into our system, and it takes 10 years to get through NEPA. You know, we put it in our pipeline, and it's not the first project we're doing. And so this is kind of where they got the church giggles. I said, we'll be a contractor, and I'll be the contractor. And I'm pretty sure how it's going to turn out.
That's how they do it.
I've done a lot of EAs. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so Manda, I did not know Manda. I don't know a lot about the horse world, although I'm learning today. And I would consider myself an ally. To the horse world. I consider horses just part of the large animal cadre and suite that should be on the landscape. They're just one of them. So to me, as a wildlife biologist, that's just one of them, and that's how I fit in with you today, and we're going to put them on. Okay? So Eric Molvar got me in contact with Manda. He knew that I was working on this project in Birch Creek, and he said, "Why don't you talk to her?" And I said, "Oh, the horse ladies, huh? Okay." That's what I said. And so I talked to her, and some of you know Amanda, and she was enthusiastic because that's Amanda. And I said, okay. And I got her book to read it to make sure I believed who she said she was, and I think people will tell you who they are if you'll let them. And as Maya Angelou said, when people tell you who they are, believe them the first time. So I had some people that I didn't want to work with, but I would work with Manda, and we're working together on this project. And she's it's not possible without Manda. So that's who we are. That's who she is. Many of you know her. This is who I am. I grew up in the mountains, and really, my parents were old, and I really never got to town. And you can see my ancestry. You can maybe see the Swedish Mormon immigrant family and the bootlegger family from different. You might be able to guess which is which. This is my father, who was a Mustanger. That's all there was to do. Yeah. And he said to me before he died of that horse, you can see that big head on that horse. That's a wild horse. It's a one-man horse. Nobody else got on that horse. And he said, that horse killed a man. And I said to him, how many horses did you guys kill? And he said, more than one. But anyway, my parents were quite a bit older, and I then went to live and work with my grown sister and her husband on a large farm, and that's where I developed a good deal of my philosophy about some of these things. All right, so that's me. Then I went to work for the Forest Service. I've done a whole bunch of projects, worked with the interagency grizzly bear study team, worked on fires, worked on winter range and sage grouse habitat and stuff. And did some bat work and more bear work, and that's rattlesnakes. I did a rattlesnake study up there. I call that Mother's Day. And then I went to BYU, Idaho, and put together their range science and their wildlife and ecology programs and their real classes. Okay, so what are our goals in, and how am I doing for? Okay, we want to reintroduce bison and horses to their ecologically native habitat. They evolved with the blue bunch wheatgrass, with the Indian ricegrass, with the needle and thread stipa. Then they were extirpated along with bison and bighorn sheep, and other animals were extirpated from that valley. And we've brought those species back. And just in my mind, the blue bunch wheatgrass and the Indian grass and the needle and thread says, oh, the bighorn sheep are back. Oh, the elk are back. And they're going to say, oh, horses are back. It's been a while. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're going to manage the bison and horses as a normal component of the herbivore suite, just like elk, bighorn sheep, and other things. Okay? We're going to allow predators to function in their proper ecological role. That's code words for when they take a foal or they take a bison calf, we're not calling wildlife services to come kill them. Okay? We're going to allow the evolutionary forces to operate. That means that they will migrate with the seasons, north and south with the elevation, and then up the valleys as well for shelter. Okay? And when they die, their nutrients will cycle. Okay. All right. Which does not happen now. What happens now is in the winter, they take the cows with their yearling calves off, and those nutrients go to the slaughterhouse kill floor, and we're essentially mining them away, and they don't cycle.
With the horses you're reintroducing, are you guys going to have stallions also, or are you working on trying to get?
We are working, and it's a struggle to get non-cut ones from the BLM, and we have a few, and we're working with some vets, and it may take us a little while to get the sex ratio the way we want it. We may need to bring in some studs. But yes, and then they will stay year-round. Now, I told Mand I wouldn't work unless we would have to do some sort of population control. We've got to do that because the permits have a ceiling, and I do not. And I want to graze at a low level. And so we're working with the contraception and that kind of thing. Not enough. Yeah. And we'll see how it goes. And we'll be adaptive to it. And it'd be great if it did. Yeah, thank you. All right. Population levels, restore the beaver population. I want to show you this. This stream is about this wide and about that deep. And I took this picture from up on the side of the mountain, and that, if you can't see too well, this is actually from a slide. This is how old it is. And that is a beaver lodge. That's a nice beaver pond, right? It got trapped out. I took that 25 years ago. Yeah, I know. I was 6'4" and good looking. And it got trapped out. It got colonized again. It got trapped out. Okay. Okay. But we will allow then we have some strategies to allow this to happen, and I know the trapper. And in order for that whole valley was 3/4 to 1.25 miles wide, full of beaver dams all the way down. Okay, I don't think I'm going to get to it. I think I'm going to run out of time. This is where the trappers came in the 18 teens. They came to those sink system valleys. Well, they didn't come there because there weren't beaver. That's where they went. Okay. Right now in Birch Creek, if you don't count this Willow Creek tributary up in Birch Creek in the valley, and I know pretty well, I do not think there is a beaver dam in 55 miles. Okay.
Can I ask why he's trapping beaver? Is it still fur?
I'm going to get to that in a minute. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you about the culture and the idea. When I was in high school, I trapped. Okay, that's where I lived. That's what you did. Okay, I was the outdoor guy, and I want to talk about that in a minute, and how we're going to stop it. Okay, we want to enhance the local economy. I lived in this county as I worked as a wildlife biologist for this for the Forest Service there. My wife taught in the high school. She taught all the county commissioners now, you know, and some of them were a little below average, but anyway.
Still are.
We want to provide opportunities for so we're going to hire locally, and I know who to hire, and that will help us a lot. Not only get good work, but you just need to, right? Yeah. Sure. Provide opportunities for the public. This is on public land. This is public land. Okay, so, and then serve as a template for other projects. There's a lot of people doing a lot of cool things, but I think this might be a template for some other places at times. Question?
So are you going to allow hunting on?
Well, as it turns out, that is under state law, and so the Idaho Fish and Game is under the purview of the state legislature, and you bet they're going to hunt. Now, is it? Public land. Now, and I want to talk about that a little bit. Although I think we can do some things with managed seasons and the wildlife, the regional habitat biologist. This is my former student, and I know all these guys, and I think there's some things we can do, but it will be hunted.
Can they hunt your bison?
No, they're livestock.
Okay.
They're livestock. So are the horses. We don't tell the stallions. They think they're wild. But they're under a permit. That's what I've done. This is public land grazing. We have the permit. So we now are the people with all the protection. I mean, you're saying, well, the system works in favor of the livestock interests. Well, that's us. Some definitions. Now I know the group I'm with. So when I work with the ranchers and stuff, many times they say, well, you got to call those feral. And I'm a scientist, so under the definition feral, this is especially an animal in a wild state after escape from captivity or domestication. Okay, that's fine. If we're going to do that, we're going to work by the rules, though, and we will call everything by its proper name. And so for domestic cattle, any non-native species that significantly well, they do, modifies or disrupts the ecosystem it colonizes. So cattle are an invasive species. So when I work with a rancher and they want to say feral, you're going to call them feral, okay, and we're going to call your cows invasive species. Okay. All right. Enough of that. All right. Yeah. Now, that's Przewalski's horse. And this, as you know, this is Chauvet Cave. And that's 30,000 years ago. And as it turns out, it looks like the science now says that Przewalski actually was at one time domesticated for a little while, and so it's a feral horse. Okay. You tell that to that guy up there that painted. That's, to me, it makes no, absolutely, unequivocally, irrevocably, no stinking difference. And I want those horses as part of the, and look at those horses, okay? And look at that leopard kind of, and do you think, now somebody said, well, whoever painted that was on mushrooms, and it might be, but there are horses with that pattern, and if he ever saw it, he said, when I get in the cave, that's what I'm painting. Those, you can call them feral if you want, but to me, they're part of the wildlife, okay? So that they're going to be part of our wildlife suite that is there. Those are the Chalice horses. That's 2 valleys over from where I am, and they're going to be there all winter. That's where I'm headed.
But do you think using the word feral, which I hate, makes them more vulnerable to the whims of the BLM slaughtering them, et cetera, et cetera?
I am not that deep, and I don't care.
Oh.
I'm going to put horses out there. Okay? All right.
Yours. That's about all you can do.
That's about all I can do. All right. And I just wanted, I told you that they take the nutrients off in the basic ecology lesson. You understand that energy flows through trophic levels. It comes from Mr. Sun. It only goes through these, and you lose it at every trophic level. And if you don't keep getting energy into your ecosystem, it's done in about 12 hours. The nutrients, like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, all of them, cycle unless you mine them and take them to the kill floor. And that's what's been happening. All right. So that's another thing that we're doing with our rewilding. Now, there is some recycling. This was asked for hunting. This is a elk gut pile. So somebody shot an elk and gutted it right there, and the predators use that. In fact, wolves use them. The wolves are getting good at it, except once they get pretty smart at it, they get good and they take a calf, and then one of the local ranchers calls wildlife services and they wipe them out, and then you have the stupid yearling males running the pack, and they're too dumb to, it's like high school boys. It's not real thoughtful, and it takes them a couple years to figure this out. By then they get good at taking a calf, then we start over, and that's just a mess with their population dynamics, but it is somewhat of a resource. And the other one on the right was a poached elk. They took the back straps and the quarters and the head, but there is some calcium recycling, and you can see that's the rumen contents up there. So there is some cycling, but we're going to keep all of the cycling. The other thing is it benefits the predators, and you will have a more stable predator population if the winter kill stays on the landscape. And the other thing is, if the dominant males, both of bears and of mountain lions, are not removed from the population, and you know this, then they suppress the young guns. And so you have less, if you have one big tom mountain lion, he breeds 4 or 5 females and keeps all the young guns out of there. If he's gone, you've got 4 or 5 young lions breeding those females, and there's more predation going on. So it's not a stable situation. So we're going to leave them on the landscape, and that's one of the things I had to negotiate with the Forest Service. Generally, for livestock, they want you to remove dead livestock because it's an attractant. And I worked with them, and they will allow us to pull them out of sight from trails and put them in a hole or something like that. And I have seen black bears on cattle death losses in those mountains. And it's an energy load. And the reason that many of the grizzly bears are struggling is because it's not a great berry ecosystem like central Idaho. And like Yellowstone, the grizzly bears and the black bears rely on dead carrion, that's redundant, on carrion like bison. And when those females with young of the year cubs, so they're nursing, and that female is lactating and she's under some really energy stress, she comes out and she hits a bison carcass and she loads up on protein right then, and that saves her. Well, you don't have that on the national forest because those livestock are all gone in the winter and they don't die. Well, we're going to leave the death loss on. Okay. All right. All right. All right. So, Birch Creek Rewilding, the agency requirements, and I'm going to run over. Do I?
You can have no.
Dad,
Pat went early. So one before you was early.
tell me when to quit. All right. All right. We're going to run bison and horses as livestock, although I told you we're not telling the stallions they're livestock. It hurts their feelings. Okay? At reduced stocking rates. I'm going to contract the NEPA analysis, which I have to do for a change of livestock from invasive species to natural species. You just have to. And I'm not mad at the agencies. I mean, they're working in the system they're working in too. They have to do that. A whole bunch of stuff. We're going to stop killing predators and allow nutrients to Oh, I wanted to show you those. The brand. You have to have a brand, right? And so I did not know. I refused to watch Yellowstone because I did not like the way it portrayed the agencies nor cowboys and the folks I grew up with. And so I would not watch it. I didn't know. I did not know. I put the Y with the arrows on it. It's for Yellowstone everywhere, meaning, yeah. But I did not put the rocking arm under it. When you get a brand, you have to send them 8 possibilities so that if there's any, well, there's nobody that had this. And the ladies in the Boise office got a chuckle out of this and sent me what they wanted to. And there's my brand.
So, just a hop, skip, and a jump from this area is the Wood River Valley. Have you heard of the Wood River Wolf Project?
Yes. Yeah.
They do, I think, some real good.
Particularly with the sheep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've done some nice things, and but it's always a struggle. I'll say that. It's always a struggle.
Well, because everyone else, all the other ranchers who aren't participating in that resent the hell out of it. Number one, because
it works.
That makes them look bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
And it just goes against that historical bias toward killing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. We're hopeful that we will be the permittee, and so when we negotiate with the permittee, we're negotiating with ourselves, and so we say to ourselves, hey, let's not call Wildlife Services, and then we're done. So I do want to say this. It is not as if horses are magical ponies that put out rainbows and poop Skittles. It is not that if you keep them in a confined area, they will damage the habitat. They, just like elk will, just like cattle will. These are some cattle damaged areas, and one in Little Lost, and this one is in Arizona. Then I took both of those, and it's like, yeah, you kept them in there too long, and you didn't feed them enough, and they beat the snot out of it. Horses will do that too. Have you heard, what do you call suburban blight? 2 acres and a horse, okay? So we're going to graze them at low levels. Now, you remember that pie chart? That space is what we have then for the vegetation, and we'll give that to horses and bison, but cut it down. Well, guess who will benefit? Elk, bighorn sheep, pronghorn, and everything else. There we go. I'm going to skip this. This is like academic. We're starting from scratch, and we're kind of new. That's our headquarters.
Looks cozy.
It is. Okay. And I was going to talk about the allotments and the vegetative. I will show you the vegetative communities well. I'll show you the allotments. So it's 70,000 acres. There are 2 that are connected here and 2 that are connected there. We do have the ability to have a crossing permit between them so that they can migrate. But that's 70,000 acres. And yeah.
Can I ask you about the previous slide? You had the biocrust listed. What was?
Here's the biocrust right here. It's called Rhizoplaca Valley by the botanists. Last summer, the Botanical Society of America called me up and said, "Can you take us on a tour of Birch Creek?" And I said, "Well, yes, I know. Let me tell you." But they said, "We already know. It's really well known for its biocrust and its Rhizoplaca vagrant lichens." And what's a vagrant lichen? They're not rooted. They're not attached to rocks. They blow in the wind, and the antelope eat them. Who knew? Well, the Botanical Society of America knew, and I took those guys up there. So anyway, so there's our biocrust. That's Birch Creek. It's not big. No. And that's another riparian area. That is Pass Creek coming down. It's a tributary. That's Willow Creek. I already talked to you about another tributary. At lower elevation, we have chicken sage and low sage. This is the NRCS doing the soil survey there. I wanted to tell you about this. So this is a large valley, a large meadow at the bottom of the valley, and I want to read you this real quickly, and then I think I will have to quit. I think this is where this took place, and it's written by Osborne Russell, Journal of a Trapper, and so this is 1834. So I traveled according to the directions until I found myself among thousands of buffalo. The route was rocky, and my horse's feet were whatever. And after traveling about 30 miles, I lay down and slept soundly during the night. The next morning, I arose and proceeded on my journey down the stream till about 9 o'clock, where I found a sandy plain and a high butte. Am I on the wrong? Anyway, I'm sorry for being on the wrong page, but he runs into the Bannocks, who he knew. And they invite him to stay because they didn't know what we were going to do to him later. And he said he counted 332 lodges at the mouth of Birch Creek, and I think it has to be there. And he said there were thousands of buffalo, and there were about 6 guys per lodge. And he said they each killed about 3 bison. He said, I think they killed about 1,000 bison, and they got their winter meat that way. That space is filled by domestic cattle now. I'm not saying the bison came through there every year. Some years they came through Little Lost. Some years they came through Medicine Lodge. But this is the space that we are rewilding now. Okay. Then there is a Wyoming sage band, and then there is higher elevation. There is a basin big sage band with the mixed conifer. Here you can see there, saying there. In some places there's a juniper band in between the basin big sage and the Wyomingensis sage level, and these are the juniper. And as far as carbon storage goes, these are 300-400-year-old trees, and they've got carbon in them. And they've held that long. And then here is the mixed conifer with the aspen in it. So this whole elevational range is here, and we say when climate changes happens, it doesn't matter what we do right now, we can't stop it. We're too late. That's happening. Well, there's more to it, but that's the project. That's what I'm trying to do. I'd be happy to visit with any of you on maybe ways to get NEPA done, landscape levels, if you want to participate with us, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.